the point I try to make in the book is when we have a predictable system and a metric that's fluctuating, the answer for how to improve that system is rarely going to be found in asking what happened last week. That we need to step back and take a little bit more systematic approach to improvement, which could be doing an A3 problem solving sheet. It could be a Six Sigma project, but not just reacting and asking for a root cause for a single data point. And there is a time and a place to react, but through the use of process behavior charts, we can learn to filter out the noise in a metric so we can use our time more wisely and react to the signals when they appear.
Hi, everybody. I'm Elizabeth Swan.
And I'm Tracy O'Rourke.
And we are from GoLeanSixSigma.com, and you're listening to the Just in Time Cafe podcast, where we bring you fabulous apps, polls, news, books, and people so you can build your problem-solving muscles.
Elizabeth, I just realized I'm not going to see you until next year.
That sounds so sad, Tracy.
I know, but thank God it's only a day away.
Okay. Well, then grab some New Year's cookies and let's hit the private dining room.
Sounds good. So, Elizabeth, this is our last menu of the year.
Right. Well, for our final episode of the year, we're going to focus on measurement and how we look at data. So for today's special, we've got your interview with lean thought leader Mark Graban, who published the ebook, Measures of Success. And then for today's appetizer, we'll address the second in our series on software packages that analyze and display our data. For our In the News segment, we'll find out how Google cafeterias use data to avoid millions of pounds of food waste. And for the printed page, we're going to discuss our take on Mark Graban's new book, since it highlights the power of control charts, right? So more data display. It's our last meal of the year, Tracy.
Yes, and I think data is so appropriate because this is the time of year that people tend to reflect, and they tend to be reflective about the year, and they want to plan for next year. So that's a great choice.
Yeah, taking the measure of the year. What was 2018 all about?
Remember to stay tuned for this month's coupon code in order to get a discount on the Go Lean Six Sigma online training.
Let's get to the appetizer.
Okay, Elizabeth, so this is our second in our series on software we use to create charts and do statistical analysis on improvement projects. This time we're focusing on Sigma Excel.
Yeah, so this Sigma Excel is an add-on to Excel. We covered Excel last episode. So this adds on to Excel. So it doesn't require learning a new app. And just as we said last time, if you're using Excel, obviously a lot of people are familiar with it. So this doesn't require that excess or that additional burden of having to figure out how does this software work. So you can take a column of numbers and select it and create a histogram, a Pareto, a control chart. You could bring up their sample size calculator and just plug in what you know about your data set in order to get it to sort of calculate your sample size. You can select any hypothesis test. It has, MSA, measurement systems analysis, and DOE, the design of experiments. So all the stat tools are there. It also comes with a few templates. I haven't used these, obviously, because we have our own, but it's got a SciPoc, it's got a project charter, there's a value stream map and a fishbone diagram. I bet you didn't even notice those, did you, Tracy?
I did not. I'm amazed.
I know. For most of these, the program creates a new tab in your Excel document, and that's where the chart or the output of your hypothesis test appears. So the data stays intact on one tab, and then the chart or the output appears on this other tab. And you can do that as many times as you want and delete the extra tabs and sort of create new charts. But every time you do it, it creates a brand new chart. It doesn't add to your old chart. It's pretty easy to use the dialog boxes. They're not super sophisticated, but you do have lots of options of how you want to build things. The website itself has lots of how-to videos if you're curious or you want a little more background on a particular chart or hypothesis test. They're also very responsive to email, so you can email questions to folks there and they respond pretty quickly. They have a 30-day free trial, so you could go check it out. You don't have to commit right away. It retails for $2.99 and the license is perpetual. So that means you don't keep paying yearly for this. You just own it, which is nice. They've got student discounts, they've got site licenses. And since our Black Belt training requires a stat package, we have data sets and instructions for both Sigma Excel and Minitab on our website. We'll cover Minitab next week, but Tracy and I have both created instructions for all of the charts, graphs, and tests and you can download those on our site.
Yes, and I think they do a great job of explaining how to do it. We use Bahama Bistro examples for those data sets. And the other thing is, the reason why we really like Sigma Excel is because it works with Mac. And both Elizabeth and I have Mac. So if you're a Mac user, this is probably a great choice for you if you're looking for an added stats package.
I forgot about that. That's true, Tracy. This one is ambidextrous, Mac, PC. And as she said, that we built the data sets. They're all around the Bahama Bistro, and those are all on the site. So if you have a different stats package, you could use that package on the data sets. You're not beholden to these two. But that's why we covered this one. We actually use it, and we find it easy to use.
I'm Tracy O'Rourke, and you're listening to the Just in Time Cafe podcast.
Up next, it's Lean Six Sigma in the news. So Tracy, this is something we might need in our kitchen.
Yes, very interesting article about Google cafes. They are using something called LeanPath, and what you're talking about in terms of kitchen is a scale that measures food waste unbelievably. So Google has cafes that serve 207,000 meals a day in 200 cafes across 21 countries because Google is like a country.
Yeah.
And since 2014, they've avoided 4 million pounds of food waste using LeanPath. And it's, again, a combination scale and waste measurement system. But basically what happens is it raises awareness for their people that are making meals about how much they're purchasing, how much they're using, how much usage in water and energy. And it really has helped raise awareness for the people that are making the food. And I think awareness is the key. A lot of people said they didn't realize how much food they were wasting. So what's wonderful about this solution is they are literally reducing waste because all of this food would end up in a landfill basically. And they're not doing that anymore to the tune of 4 million pounds, which is pretty amazing.
That's totally amazing. And it's funny because, well, it's not funny, but it's poignant because you were just at Feeding San Diego, and they're actually the recipient of what could have been food waste.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes. So it's just funny how all of these sort of are connected in a way. So Feeding San Diego is a local nonprofit out here, and their primary driver is wasted food in grocery stores. And they hit like 240 grocery stores every night and to the tune of 300 Starbucks every night, collecting food that is about to be wasted, produce, fruits and vegetables even, and they redistribute it quickly so it's eaten. So they'll distribute it to churches and foods. And get this, Elizabeth, they've saved 26 million pounds of waste. So think about that. Think about how much waste is happening that they actually can create a business redistributing the food,
Wow.
which is pretty, it's beautiful and amazing that they're doing this, but it's also showing how much food waste we really have. And a lot of people, especially Feeding San Diego, are saying we don't have a food problem. There are people that are hungry. We don't have a food problem. We have a distribution problem. So get out there and volunteer at some of these organizations, especially Feeding San Diego. They're doing really good work.
So that's great. So both ends of the equation, you've got people or organizations like Google using the LeanPath scale and measurement system to raise awareness and avoid food waste, but you have fabulous organizations like Feeding San Diego making use of the food that may go to waste, which is clearly at 26 million pounds dwarfs the 4 million that was being saved by Google.
And I'll just remind you all that we just interviewed Alicia Saki last month. She's the COO of Feeding San Diego. So if you missed that podcast, go find it and listen to it.
Yeah, that's a great one. Thank you for that reminder. I'm Elizabeth Swan, and you're listening to the Just in Time Cafe podcast. In a short while, we'll get to hear Tracy's interview with Mark Graban, lean thought leader and author of the new ebook, Measures of Success. But first, it's the printed page.
So Elizabeth, I'm interested in your take on Mark Graban's new book because it takes us back to the Lean Six Sigma Basic, the control chart. It's a good reflection, isn't it?
It's great. It actually was a really lovely callback to kind of the basics of measurement and looking at data. So it puts a spotlight on the value of the control chart. And he specifically focuses on the individuals chart, otherwise known as the X chart. And that's great because I've found over time, that's pretty much what everyone uses. Like you've got this great control chart tree you can use, like, I don't even know how many, there might be 15 of these things, but really everybody just uses the individuals. So it's great that he calls back to that. He relabels it the process behavior chart. This is based on work by Wheeler, and that's great because I think it focuses on what is this really about? Because control, some people get confused. What does that mean? What are we controlling? And he's saying you're just looking at the behavior of your process. So these are time plots. They were championed by Dr. Deming. They were created by his mentor, Walter Schuhart. This is all back at the Hawthorne lab. This is eventually became Bell Labs, AT&T. Great people came out of this. Deming, Schuhart, Dr. Duran, and these are just quality gurus galore. But this was really great work. And Schuhart discovered predictable qualities of data. So he used these charts to get insight on what you could expect out of a process. And what Mark Graban does is sort of highlight the fact that you need to look at these charts to see what's happening. What are the trends in your data, as opposed to looking at single points of data. He's got a nice term for, I call it a wall of data. He calls it bowling charts. Like when people just look at this matrix of numbers, and then he said people add like the red green indicators, like, ooh, this month we're green. Last month we were red. And he's saying that can cause people just overreact to noise. Nothing really different is happening in your process. It's common variation, but by looking at these red green indicators, we force people to go, oh no, quick, do something, we went up. Oh no, quick, do something, we went down. And the control charts just say, well, that's just common cause variation. And then they help you see, well, this is special. There's a signal here, right? I mean, that's kind of the beauty of control charts, right, Tracy?
Yes. When I talk about common cause and special cause with students, I always talk about traffic and drive time to work, which is seemingly getting worse here in San Diego. And so we always say, well, common cause variation is basically, the amount of traffic you expect to see on your way to work, and you account for that in your process. You leave earlier, where special cause variation might be that there's an accident, it's unpredictable, it's random, you can't necessarily plan for it. Or it could be, well, in San Diego, it would be weather because we never check the weather. And when it rains, nobody can drive, and nobody knows it's going to rain because nobody checks the weather here.
Oh my God, there's weather. We have to stop the car. Actually, you had special cause variation yesterday, didn't you?
I did. My car broke down at a client, believe it or not. So unfortunately, I had to wait for a tow. And it wasn't a great customer experience, I'm going to have to say, but I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus right now.
4 hours, Tracy. That is special cause variation. And so that is the beauty of the control charts, right? If we looked at Tracy's drive time to the client every day, would have been, what's it usually? Was it a half hour, 20 minutes, something like that?
Yeah, it's 26 miles, but I have to leave over an hour to get there.
So most days we'd see a little over an hour back and forth for Tracy until yesterday when we'd see the 4 hour spike, and we'd say, what can we do to prevent that for Tracy in the future? So this is a great callback. It's a great reminder of the power of these charts that just tell you a lot about what to expect out of your process. So please take a look at the full review on our site and get a sense of what's in Mark's book, and stay tuned for Tracy's interview with Mark at the end of this episode.
Okay, it's time to announce the coupon code.
This code is for 20% off any of our Lean Six Sigma training and certification courses. That's white belt, yellow belt, green belt, black belt, and lean training.
So if you've joined us at the Just in Time Cafe, just use coupon code 20 eggnog. It's got a lot less calories than the drink. That's 20 EGGNOG during checkout. Make sure to use it soon, since the coupon code will expire at the end of January.
Coming up next, it's today's special. Tracy, can you give us a little preview of your interview with Mark Graban?
So Mark is an award-winning author and has written numerous books prior to this, specifically about lean in healthcare. It was a pleasure talking with him about his new book, and I think you're going to really enjoy the interview. It's a departure from his other books. It's really about measures and process behavior charts. So it's not specific to healthcare, but I really enjoyed it, and I think you will too. I'd like to welcome our guest for today's special, Mark Graban. We'll be highlighting his newest book, Measures of Success, React Less, Lead Better, Improve More. So let me tell you a little bit about Mark before we get started. He's already a 2-time Shingo Award winner for one of his books, Lean Hospitals, Improving Quality, Patient Safety, and Employee Engagement. And another book he co-authored with Joe Swartz called Healthcare Kaizen, Engaging Frontline Staff in Sustainable Continuous Improvements. He's also written with Swartz the Executive Guide to Healthcare Kaizen and the editor of the anthology Practicing Lean. So, in addition to that, Mark is also the founder of leanblog.org. Mark is a self-proclaimed improvement geek and coach. He serves as a consultant through his company Constancy Inc. and is also a senior advisor to the technology company KaiNexus. He has focused on healthcare improvement since 2005 after starting his career in industry at General Motors, Dell, and Honeywell. Mark has degrees in industrial engineering from Northwestern University and a mechanical engineering and an MBA from MIT's Massachusetts Institute of Technology Leaders for Global Operations program. Mark and his wife live in Texas, and apparently you like to cook. Welcome, Mark. Welcome to the Just in Time Cafe. Tell us a little bit about your cooking.
Hi, Tracy. Yeah, I don't know if this is on the menu at the Just in Time Cafe.
We might add it.
In terms of hobby cooking, this is the second house that we've been in over the last 10 years where we had a wood-burning pizza oven put into the backyard. So when people say pizza oven, I really should just say wood-burning oven because you can do more than pizza, but we love doing that in the backyard, and it's great for having get-togethers. Yes,
that sounds like a lot of fun.
It is. It's the right amount. It's the right amount of work and the right amount of challenge. So I enjoy that.
Oh, wonderful. Well, hopefully I get to come over there one day for some pizza.
Yeah. Be careful making an open invitation the next time there's a major lean conference in the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Right. True. So we are here to talk about your new book, Measures of Success. So this seems to be a little bit of a departure from your other books, Mark. What led you to write this book?
Well, that's a good question. You're right. It's meant to be a bit of a departure in a couple of ways. One, the first couple of books that I've written or co-authored with Joe were healthcare focused and were, lean or Kaizen and continuous improvement focused. The Measures of Success is intended for a broader audience. Like you were saying in the introduction, I've worked for manufacturing companies, software companies, as a consultant to healthcare organizations. And, through 20 plus years in the working world, you start seeing different patterns, and one of those patterns is, some opportunities to improve the way we post and track and react to metrics in the workplace, whether that's on a bulletin board or in a computer system. And so I wanted to write a book that appealed to a broader audience. It had examples from those different industries. And then, some of the core methodology the book is built around, we can call process behavior charts. It's basically a form of control chart or statistical process control chart. And that's something I learned very early in my career through my dad, who was an engineer at General Motors, and his exposure to Dr. Deming and to somebody who's still active and with us today, Dr. Don Wheeler, some statistical methods where I've seen them be very helpful. And as I meet people in all these different industries, it's just something that sadly others haven't had the opportunity to get exposed to. So that's what I'm trying to help accomplish with this book. Not replace Don Wheeler's book, Understanding Variation, but just to supplement and I think in my book make some tighter connections to lean management. I was really thrilled. The final thing I'll say about the book is that Don Wheeler wrote the foreword, which I was very happy that he agreed to do that.
Oh, that's wonderful. So I did notice on your book that you have a picture of a roller coaster. And I read the analogy that you say why you use that in the book, but I'd love to have you tell our audience a little bit about that analogy.
Well, there's this roller coaster ride is the current state. It's not necessarily what we're aiming for with the book. We're trying to help people get off of this emotional organizational roller coaster where we want to improve, but the reality is, and I think more often than not, we have metrics that go up and then they go down, and they're just basically fluctuating around an average. And people get real excited about the upswing, and then they get kind of scared on the downhill. I don't know if that's an exact perfect analogy to the roller coaster, but you've got all these ups and downs, and at the end, say in the analogy in the book, I think I said, at the end of the day, you often end up right back where you started, which is the goal with the roller coaster. But, sometimes I think the excitement in the workplace gets in the way of improvement. And, that excitement of reacting to every up and down in a metric, or, demanding a root cause explanation for every data point that's worse than the target. Like it feels like to people, well, hey, we're doing something. Mm-hmm. And it's not a matter of, sitting back and passively watching a metric fluctuate, of course. But, the point I try to make in the book is, when we have a predictable system and a metric that's fluctuating, the answer for how to improve that system is rarely going to be found in asking what happened last week. That we need to step back and take a little bit more systematic approach to improvement, which could be doing an A3 problem-solving sheet. It could be a Six Sigma project, but not just reacting and asking for a root cause for a single data point. And there is a time and a place to react, but through the use of process behavior charts, we can learn to filter out the noise in a metric so we can use our time more wisely and react to the signals when they appear.
It seems that there is a lot of overreaction, or there can be. And some of the things that the characteristics that you mentioned in terms of the excitement and the emotion, and, we have seen lots of firefighting, if you will, even that could be an overreaction. I think what's interesting is you talk a little bit in the book about when you do that as a leader, what happens in the organization and why that isn't necessarily good. Can you expand a little bit on that?
Yeah, and maybe just to build on the firefighter analogy, like a lot of us who maybe now have smart thermostats, we can pull up something on the web or in an app and see how our home temperature fluctuates, even if it's set, to be cooled to 76 degrees. We shouldn't freak out and call customer support when the temperature drifts up to 77, because, well, that's just going to happen. It's how HVAC systems work. Now, if the house was on fire, hopefully you would detect that before temperature was up to some outrageous number. So, I think in the workplace, though, this sort of unfiltered react to everything mindset, for one, it ends up wasting a lot of time. When I was interviewing people and sort of getting voice of the customer and testing concepts of how I was planning on articulating things in the book, it's not hard to get people to agree that, we do waste a lot of time searching for an explanation for a small fluctuation in a metric. Or, it might be something that looks like a big fluctuation, but, that metric is fluctuating plus or minus 10% all the time. So there's no root cause for a 12% change in that metric. And so I think when we treat every blip in every metric the same, we dilute and distract our organizational capability to improve. That reaction, it feels like we're doing something, but I'm reminded, if I'm using the Dr. Deming quote right, he says sometimes don't just do something, stand there. And I don't think he's saying do nothing, but stop overreacting. And sometimes you could say it kind of less formally, like chill out, step back, improve more systematically and look at, for example, why is the average performance of our metric not near our goal? That's a different question than saying, why was last month not at our goal? And I think we can, kind of ask questions and frame problem solving a little bit differently. And again, there is a time and a place for firefighting. And the methodologies in my book help people decide when to react, when to investigate, when to go figure it out right now versus when we can kind of step back and do some more systematic problem solving.
Yes. I really like the analogy of the roller coaster. I think it definitely sets the stage of what you say, current state. And if we think about someone who has a leader that is constantly reacting to things, it becomes a little unpredictable at work, right?
Yeah.
And it seems like I don't really want my boss to be a roller coaster or my leader to be a roller coaster. I'm kind of exhausted.
Yeah. I've seen people get confused, if not demoralized, where a metric is fluctuating, and when it fluctuates positive direction, they get a pat on the back. Then when it fluctuates down, they might get a bit of a kick in the butt, and then they start feeling like random. It starts feeling like some psychology experiment where I don't know, this doesn't sound like ethical science anymore. You randomly shock some mouse and see how it behaves, or you randomly give the mouse a treat. Like that's no way to run an organization. Or even there's times where I've seen leaders kind of start learning some of this approach, and they'll praise people on the good day, and then on the bad day they'll say, well, it's okay, that's the system's performance. And the lack of a pat on the back feels like a passive aggressive kick in the butt. So I think when we teach people to stop getting so excited about the ups and stop getting so upset about the downs, I think it in a way builds credibility with your employees that you don't appear to be kind of just randomly reacting to whatever stimulus is in front of you in the moment.
I think something that caught my eye in your book is, even though it's a book on measures of success, you recommend we don't manage the metric, manage the system that leads to the results, and then lead the people who help improve the system. Mm-hmm. Can you expand on that a little bit more?
Well, I mean, these are lessons. I could think of learning elements of that from Dr. Deming's books, from the lean methodology, this idea that results are, it's right there in the name of the word, they're the result of work, they're the result of processes, a system. And you can think, well, the right process leads to the right result. Now, that doesn't mean the right process leads to exactly the same result every time. So we learn from Deming and people who learn from him, like Don Wheeler, that there is always going to be variation in a metric, and we need to understand what's normal and what's unusual variation. But if people are focusing too much on the metric instead of the processes and systems that lead to the result, there's a lot of risk of dysfunction. So I always think back to Brian Joyner and his book. I think it's kind of an underappreciated book, Fourth Generation Management. He was somewhat of a contemporary to Dr. Deming. And Joyner would say, when you put pressure on people to hit a target kind of no matter what, threat of punishment if you don't hit the metric, 3 possible things can happen. People can distort the metric, they can distort the system, or they can actually improve the system. Well, and unfortunately, all the distortion paths are usually easier or more within people's grip. So if you look at, for example, the Wells Fargo scandal that was in the news a couple years ago, where it was discovered that customers were being signed up for accounts that they didn't ask for and didn't authorize. So they were getting hit with different fees, or it was hurting their credit rating. And the bank claims, we fired a couple thousand unethical people who worked at our bank. And for one, I think, if your bank had a couple thousand unethical employees, that to me sounds like a bank problem. Mm-hmm. If that was really the case. But when you step back and start asking, why would a person go through the effort to set up an account somebody didn't ask for? Long story short, it traces all the way back to the CEO who set a goal. He said, 8 is great. Every customer should have 8 accounts. And people were being rewarded or punished based off of what was a really unreasonable goal. And it was based on a rhyme. I'm glad someone didn't suggest to the CEO, you could say 9 is fine. 9 accounts. Everyone needs 9 accounts. And thankfully, the CEO, I don't take any great glee in it, but the CEO was held accountable. The CEO got fired. But the sad thing is that I think a lot of bank tellers and bank branch managers got thrown under the bus and got blamed for, if you want to keep your job, you're going to do what it takes. And leaders, I think, were pretty clueless in setting a goal and just being happy with the results and not really understanding what was going on.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I think a common one a lot of people could probably relate to is safety, right? So what we find out sometimes when they say, I think days is good and it works for some people, but if they're only focused on the metric and not the systems and the people, they just cover up the error, they cover up the injury, there's so much focus on the metric and not the what happened and the root cause and the really where it should be focused. So
it's easier to pressure people into not reporting their injuries or not taking time off when they're injured. I mean, those are all distortions of the metric and the system. Where I get really inspired by, for example, I've had a chance to meet and learn from Paul O'Neill, who was the CEO at Alcoa, who took a very values and principles based stand when he was hired as CEO of Alcoa in 1987 to really focus on employee safety as the primary driving metric and rallying cry for the organization, because it was the right thing to do. And I think this reminds me of lean thinking around, if you focus on safety and quality, everything else will follow. Mr. O'Neill demonstrated that. Their focus on safety led to improvements and organizational changes, that he categorized as habitual excellence. The things that it takes to dramatically reduce employee injuries also end up being the things you need to do to improve quality and improve flow, and safety improved dramatically, and the stock price was one of the best performing stocks during that time period. So for anyone who ever thinks there's trade-offs between, we can't afford safety. Well, no, you just haven't figured out how to do it yet.
So you talk about process behavior charts a lot in this book, and you've got some great examples of where you put it to personal use, even with weight loss, your blog traffic, and even a wine bar that you maybe even explored purchasing.
A different kind of cafe. It wasn't going to be the just-in-time wine cafe.
Right.
Would have gotten in trouble with you, right?
Right. Exactly. So it was really interesting to read about those and hear about your discoveries and what they were telling you with some of those examples, which I think is great for people to learn. So tell me, how will this help leaders if they use process behavior charts and select the right measures? What do you think it's going to do for them?
So you're asking if they were to apply this to some of their personal life?
Yes.
How would that help them
either personal life or even looking at some of the measures at work that they're monitoring?
Well, I mean, so I think, this is why I titled the one book that I edited and contributed to Practicing Lean. If we're practicing lean, we should be practicing improvement. We should be practicing the science around understanding cause and effect relationships between improvements we think we're making and the results we're getting. So I think we can practice some of that at home. Joe Schwartz and I, in our book Healthcare Kaizen, included a chapter in the book of examples of people practicing the Kaizen style of continuous improvement at home, because we think it just kind of goes to show how it becomes a way of thinking, and people are motivated to solve problems that matter, and that's true in the workplace. But back to process behavior charts. There was a period where I had a goal of losing some weight, and you measure yourself every day, and you start to learn, there is routine, natural fluctuation in your weight from day to day. Even if the experts tell you to weigh yourself at the same time every day. So I would typically do it first thing in the morning, because guess what? Your weight fluctuates by a couple of pounds during the day. So we can eliminate that one source of measurement variation, if you will. Measure yourself every day. You can plot that, even if you're trying to just maintain a stable weight, you plot that on a process behavior chart. You calculate the natural process limits, and you learn not to freak out about every pound or two up or down. Mm-hmm. The rules for finding a signal in a process behavior chart might be helpful in the sense of, one of the rules of a signal is, 8 consecutive days above the baseline average. So you might not want to get concerned about 1 or a couple of days above your average baseline weight if it's over that average for more than a week, now you might only be up a pound or two, but you might say, well, let me evaluate the system in terms of my personal system of diet and exercise, and have I made a change since before it went up? So we're looking for shifts in data instead of reacting to individual data points. And I think there's an opportunity to practice cause-effect relationships. I'm going to make a change. Let me see what the effect is. So we might be able to step back and look at longer-term trends instead of worrying about every data point. Maybe that's a good lesson to take back into the workplace.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I absolutely love it when people have the opportunity to understand a concept and apply it at home, right? Mm-hmm. And then learn from that and then actually take it into the workplace, like you said. I actually had someone that I was working with after the holidays, and he was a trainer. And, he said, I can't believe what happened over the holidays. I weighed myself and I looked at the scale and I had to check to make sure I wasn't holding a small dog. And so, obviously he hasn't been monitoring his weight every week, but I love that exercise. And I think it's just a great way to apply tools. I always tell people to do the shoe Kanban, right? So if you have too many shoes, try to work it out so you don't buy too much or
right.
Those kinds of things. It can be really helpful.
Well, your trainer teaches an important lesson around, the frequency of metrics. And, if someone, I travel a lot for work, I don't travel with a scale. So I don't weigh myself every day. And if you haven't weighed yourself for 30 days, you might find yourself surprised, or the pants waistband might be an indicator, a different signal than the number. But one other point, thinking about trainers, I worked with a trainer a couple of years ago. Weight is just one number in the context of health and fitness. So I try to talk about that in the book. If we focus too much and we don't want to obsess over any one metric, like if you're working out with a trainer, you may be adding more muscle than you are losing fat. Your weight number may go up, but then you may say, well, that suit fits better. Mm-hmm. And maybe my focus really is health and quality of life instead of just a weight number,
Absolutely. Yes, I agree with you. That's what I always tell myself when I start to gain weight. I'm just kidding. No, but I agree. It is really important. There's so many measures for health, and which one is really important? Is it just weight loss? Is it maybe inches? Is it cholesterol, which is a health metric, as you say? I mean, there's a lot of things, and ultimately, sometimes it's not just about the weight; it's about something else. So I think that's good, and deciding which of those is important is good to do.
Because we might need a balanced scorecard, as it might be called in a workplace.
Now, is the balanced scorecard you talk about by Robert Kaplan?
Yeah, and I think there are similar approaches in Lean. If you talk about strategy deployment, and True North metrics often tend to be a balanced scorecard. And I think one of the keys is anytime we focus too much on any single metric, we may end up sub-optimizing or distorting the organization in a way that's not really good for the success. I've seen in some organizations, sales gets so, it has so much pressure over them to hit an end of quarter sales number that it then ends up creating chaos for the rest of the company. And you hit your sales number, but I don't think we're more profitable than we would have been if we had actually sold a little bit less. So, that, I guess that's the example of, the need to understand a system instead of just focusing too much on any one metric.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. And I see that it happens a lot. There's a lot of, I think one thing you mentioned in your book too is KPIs. K stands for key, not cajillion performance indicators.
Yeah, sorry to laugh at my own joke, but I thought I think I came up with that. If I heard it from someone else, I should be given credit. But yeah, that's a real problem. Too many measures, too many top priority projects, and it's really hard to tell a cause and effect of we're doing a whole lot of stuff, but the metric's not really getting better, which is something we should figure out. How to get out of that situation.
That roller coaster. So
yeah, I was struggling. Do I go back to the roller coaster, or is it a hamster wheel, or put a hamster wheel on the roller coaster?
Right.
I think the hamster would enjoy that.
So we are pretty much out of time now. It was really nice having you at the cafe, but a couple of last questions. So you've been doing this a long time. you've seen a lot in your career. What are some of your career interests right now? What's striking your fancy lately?
Well, it's one of the benefits of going to different conferences is the serendipity of meeting people, and you're like, well, sometimes things happen for a reason. You chance encounter, someone introduces you to someone at a conference, and I got introduced. I was at the Lean Startup Conference, which is not my usual domain, so that's an interesting way to learn. And I got introduced to a social worker who was starting a nonprofit startup, and we were chatting. And said, "What do you do?" And I mentioned blah blah blah, trying to improve healthcare, and we were talking about some of the challenges that we've seen. And she said, "Let me tell you about a book called Motivational Interviewing." So it's not job interviewing; it's not interviewing a podcast guest. But there's this whole methodology. It's the first psychology textbook I've ever read in my life, and it was actually very readable to a non-clinician engineer. So it's really, in a nutshell, it's an approach that was developed a couple of decades ago for addiction treatment. Mm-hmm. You might think, well, what's the leap to the workplace? Well, there's another book I highly recommend. It's called Motivational Interviewing for Leadership. And I would also recommend a webinar that Ron Oslin, a former Toyota leader, presented for the Lean Enterprise Institute on this methodology of motivational interviewing, which Ron taught. It was being taught to people within Toyota, and I think it's part of kind of this valid science of around change management. Where I think a lot of times, myself included, I write about this in Practicing Lean in my chapters. I have a solution. I have the answer. I've reflected on this related to my book, Measures of Success, and the Process Behavior Chart methodology. Hey, world, here's a method that's better. Why don't you adopt it? And then somebody says, no, I like the way we do our charts. And it's really tempting to say, oh, they're resistant to change. Well, labeling someone as resistant to change isn't a really helpful strategy, whether that person is trying to beat an addiction or it's a leader, in an organization. So there's this interviewing that can take place to draw out somebody's motivation for change, which is, it's an investment in time, but it's more of an open-ended coaching discussion to sort of gain commitment first that there's an opportunity for improvement before you ever go talking about solutions. And I think that's been an interesting thing to study. I've tried, I've gotten others kind of turned on to it because I think the final thought around this is that I think in improvement circles, there's a great understanding and agreement that, we shouldn't tell people what to do. We should draw out their ideas for improvement. We should collaborate. We should engage them. But if we try pushing an idea and somebody is being resistant, and motivational interviewing teaches you that resistance is actually a natural and necessary part of the change process, by the way. A lot of, it's almost been conventional wisdom to say, oh, but you need to tell them why they need to change. Well, but the problem is in the telling. Mm-hmm. You should do this because of X. That doesn't really work any better than saying you should do this. Mm-hmm. But when you can draw out and ask, an executive, have an open-ended conversation that may end up to a point, you're not trying to manipulate anyone, but having this conversation that has a fighting chance of ending at a point where they say, I am open to learning a different way of doing things. Maybe I'll try something,
Mm-hmm.
Trying to lead somebody to that point rather than pushing and forcing ideas. As an author and an outside consultant, I can't force anyone to do anything. I can't be a quote unquote boss. So it challenges me to be, I think, a better leader and try to think through how I can help others influence within their own organization, whether they can or can't tell people what to do, if that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. And it sounds like that could be very helpful in the realm of change management, understanding motivations for change and asking people, drawing it out of people. I think that's really an important, and you've got me interested now.
Yeah. And people often have more comfort than they would admit with the status quo. Ron Oslin, the former Toyota guy, actually trademarked a phrase through his work that leaders are often addicted to the status quo. And so I think one of the other key takeaways is that instead of labeling or giving up on people because they're quote unquote resistant, you need to, to borrow the kind of related sounding phrase from Sheryl Sandberg at Facebook, you need to lean in to the conversation. Mm-hmm. That resistance doesn't mean end of discussion. That just takes the discussion in a different direction. And I think if Lean or Six Sigma people are working as change agents, I think that psychology realm is just as important, if not more important, than the technical aspects and the math.
Well, thank you for sharing with that. That is very interesting, and I think I might be looking at some motivational interviewing as well. So is there anything else we should talk about, Mark? Did you want to share anything else with our audience?
I would like to mention and give quick tribute to one of the authors of a chapter in the book Practicing Lean, who tragically passed away recently. Sam Saleh was his name, and I don't even know how we met. I think we had a mutual connection, but he wasn't a close friend by any means, but we had traded a lot of messages through LinkedIn and email. We had a couple of phone calls about a couple of things where, he did work with Lean Six Sigma in the military. He was a Marine, and also ended up doing work that was kind of more civilian work. He had moved to California, took a job in industry for the first time. And some of our most recent conversations were around motivational interviewing. That was something I had piqued his interest in. He read the books. We talked about it on the phone about, so what could we do to apply this in our own work? He was really interested in getting a job in healthcare because he had a really strong sense of service to others, and in healthcare, I can understand why that was appealing to him, and just still feeling, a sense of loss. He had a family. He wanted to do all sorts of things professionally to help people. He was very actively engaged with people on LinkedIn, and there were a lot of people who had gotten to know him through his writing and his articles there.
Well, that's very nice of you to pay a tribute to him. And I did notice on your blog that there's a GoFundMe page for his family. And I'm really sorry to hear that. It's really unfortunate. And I'm sure that the people in his life are really missing him. And so Thank you for mentioning that.
Well, and thank you for mentioning, still trying to figure out different ways to support the family. If it's okay, if people can find a link to the GoFundMe page if they go. I did a podcast episode where I read one of his articles, and I included the audiobook version of his book chapter that was read by a narrator. And so if people go to leanblog.org/322, they can learn a little bit more about Sam, read his articles, and if they feel so inclined, try to help out his family in this really, really difficult time.
Thank you, Mark. And I really enjoyed having you at the cafe. I hope we get a chance to meet at the cafe again, or maybe in real life too.
Yes, I would enjoy that a lot. And thank you for letting me be a guest on your show.
Absolutely. And you can find Mark on his website at markgraban.com. Is that the best place that they should look, Mark?
Yeah, markgraban.com or leanblog.org are the two main places. Thanks.
Wonderful. Great.
Come join me in my next webinar. Mark Graban inspired me, and my next webinar is going to be all about how to use control charts. Also, check out a fascinating Greenbelt project by Charles White. His project addressed reducing FEMA's response to natural disasters, which is, wow, that's a big topic for a Greenbelt project. And his storyboard has been published on our site, so check it out. And for those of you who'd like to get your Greenbelt certification through UC San Diego, who is currently ranked number 2 in universities in the U.S., there's a sign up for next semester, which ends January 11th. You got a few more days for that. This is a great course that includes Going Six Sigma online materials, weekly discussion boards, an interactive case study, and access to master black belts throughout the course. And Tracy and I are instructors, so it's a great opportunity.
Yeah, you get to interact with us. It doesn't matter where you're from because it's an online course, completely online, but will be interacting with me and Elizabeth and 2 other instructors, Craig Tickle and Susan Tai. So please join us in 2 weeks to hear Elizabeth's interview with Mohammed Saleh.
Thanks for another great year at the Just in Time Cafe.
See you next year. I'll miss you.